Hey TJPS listeners, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had lots of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show into all of the apps people like to listen to? How do I make money from my podcast? The answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise your podcast. That means you can get paid right away to do your podcast. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start. To join me in the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. Once again, that is anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcasts on Anchor. Welcome to an exclusive episode of the Jeremiah Patterson Show. The coronavirus has become a major problem in the United States. Schools, churches, restaurants, and bars have been closed. Most schools have been closed for the remainder of the year. Social distancing is in place and legislation is being passed to combat the coronavirus. People are now at home and working from home has become the new normal. For students like me, virtual learning is the new normal. Our school has provided us with a packet where we have to complete 4 assignments per week. It's really cool how the way they set that up and organized it. States like New York have seen exponential growth in coronavirus cases. Here in South Carolina, cases are just skyrocketing. South Carolina now has over 3,000 cases. Cases worldwide are over 1 million. And countries are doing what they can to combat this disease. But we are going to begin today in chronological order. On January 29th, 2020, the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control announced that they were monitoring the coronavirus. On Valentine's Day, state health officials urged residents to protect themselves against the flu. At this point, this caveat was emphasizing that the flu was more present than the coronavirus. On March 2nd, a response team was formed. However, there were no reported cases at the moment. On March 5th, Greenville, South Carolina mentioned the coronavirus in a tweet. Then on March 6th, the first coronavirus cases were being reported. Subsequently, on March 13th, Governor Henry McMaster declared a state of emergency. On March 14th, South Carolina reported 19 new cases. 6 days later, on March 20th, South Carolina reported 3 deaths and 125 cases. Additionally, on March 27th, South Carolina reported 13 deaths and 539 total cases. Finally, on March 31st, South Carolina had 22 deaths and over 1,000 coronavirus cases. If you just take a look there and you just look at the trajectory in the moment inevitably leading up to that point, I mean, starting off with just a couple of cases, then 19 new cases, then 6 days later, 3 deaths and 125 cases, and then 1,000 cases, and now today, over 3,000 cases. I mean, if you just look at that exponential growth, it shows how prevalent the coronavirus is, and it shows how this disease is spreading rapidly. According to the Post and Courier, Democrats and Republicans are choosing to stay healthy by ordering absentee ballot voting for the June 9th primary. As you all know, State Legislator Marvin Pendarvis will be joining me, and I'm super excited to have him on the show. Congressman Pendarvis has been doing some amazing work to combat the coronavirus. For instance, on March 19th, the Post and Courier reported, quote, to keep people from losing homes during the coronavirus outbreak, South Carolina Supreme Court halts all foreclosures, end quote. Then it just dives into the article. Quote, the SC Supreme Court on Thursday ordered a statewide halt on foreclosures, its latest measure aimed at ensuring people don't lose their homes during the coronavirus outbreak. end quote. Lawyers and advocates have been working persistently, urging the High Court to step in to protect residents, especially those living on a low income, from being evicted. Chief Justice Donald Betty ordered a freeze on all evictions statewide until May 1st. So we'll see if that date gets extended for residents who are sort of expecting evictions if payments are not processed or paid on time. But in terms of comprehending the story, what will happen on May 1st? Will this order continue or stay paused until further notice? Well, State Legislator Marvin Pendarvis' response to this order was, quote, "We can't penalize people for not having the income they expected," end quote, which is definitely true, because no one wrote on their calendars pandemic for 2020. This kind of thing was not necessarily inevitable, and that statement was absolutely veracious. Now, prior to this order, the Post and Courier reported that 2 families had been evicted in Lexington County. The evicted included a father of 4 children and his pregnant wife, as well as a single mother who complained of a cough. Here's a news clip about evictions and the South Carolina Supreme Court's decision to do this.
Businesses closed, and boy, a lot of people are forced out of work. Getting through this crisis is going to be very, very hard for people. Local and state leaders say they're trying to find some ways to offer relief. Our Georgia Reed Godfrey has that story.
Local leaders in Charleston County work to prevent residents from being put out of their home during this health crisis. And at the state level, the South Carolina Supreme Court recently followed suit.
How do we make sure that we're not putting people out in the streets and having them further congregate, which would further perpetuate the virus and do a disservice to us?
Representative Marvin Pendarvis was one of several Charleston County leaders looking to better protect South Carolinians during the coronavirus crisis. At the local level, Charleston County courts put a 2-week halt on evictions.
I knew that vulnerable populations were going to be put in a position where if they're not working, if their jobs are forced to lay them off, or if they're not able to bring in the money that they generally are accustomed to doing or to bringing in, then they weren't going to be able to afford their rent.
Shortly after, the South Carolina Supreme Court issued an order halting eviction proceedings across the state.
People who might not be able to pay their rent right now aren't paying it because they don't want to. It may be because their place of business shut down and they're not able to go to work.
South Carolina ranks in the top 10 nationally for eviction rates, which makes a move to keep residents in their homes during these uncertain times so crucial.
The most important thing that we can do right now is keep people at that, proper social distancing, making sure we keep people out of crowded areas and keep people from being exposed, because the number one defense we have right now is people not catching this.
This decision by the South Carolina Supreme Court only applies to eviction proceedings starting March 17th. In Columbia, Georgia Reed Godfrey, 7 News.
We're going to keep an eye on that story as it unfolds. There's one more thing I want to talk about before the break and before the interview, and that is MUSC. According to ABC Forward News, MUSC COVID-19 cases increased to 334. Quote, on Friday, MUSC said it has identified 334 COVID-19 cases. This includes 41 staff members, end quote. That news story alone is just unsettling, and we are seeing this all over the country. But as of today, in South Carolina, there are 82 deaths. At the beginning of the show, I mentioned that South Carolina had over 3,000 cases. Well, another place I've been following is Houston, Texas, where there are over 5,000 cases. And of course, that number could have changed by then because I wrote this script yesterday, actually Sunday night. So, over 5,000 cases in Houston, Texas, 86 deaths, and 953 recoveries. That news story alone is also just remarkable. Part of the reason I've been following Houston so much and sort of concerned about it is because that's just one city. Here in South Carolina, we have over 3,000 cases, and this is a state. Houston is a city. That's not good, and according to a pandemic expert, the coronavirus will have 5 stages, and we're only at phase 2. and I want to read now from this article in the Lifestyle Renew Houston Health. Yes, Houston Chronicle article says here, quote, "So we transitioned from phase 1, which is containment, to phase 2, which is mitigation. We are clearly in the mitigation phase now. The primary purpose of mitigation is to slow the spread of the virus within our communities. What you're seeing now is a lot of activity to try to prevent our hospitals from being overwhelmed, caring for those patients who get really, really sick from COVID. That is the purpose of the aggressive social distancing measures like closing schools, universities, going to distant learning, asking that people avoid large gatherings, closing business except for essential functions. We also seen action to mitigate the virus's economic impact, to provide economic relief and keep people employed. Those of us stuck at home or worrying about our jobs or the economy are ready to exit this phase. What are the next phases? How do we get out? How can we safely begin to reopen some schools and businesses?" And then he goes on, quote, "Phase 3 would be a second stage of containment before we have a vaccine to deploy. I'm optimistic that in 3 to 6 months we'll have a better treatment for coronavirus symptoms, a therapeutic in our toolkit that can rescue who become severely ill. But it's going to be at least 18 months. I believe there's a vaccine available to deploy in any meaningful way. While we wait for a vaccine, we'll enter a second stage of containment. During this time, we need to restart our economy, and we need to do it safely." End quote. Once again, this article right here from the Houston Chronicle about we're only in phase 2 of the coronavirus. He goes on to say phase 4 is the third stage of containment once we have a vaccine. Looking for phase 5 here. All right. I will find phase 5 for you guys, and I will do that in the last note. But another thing I just want to pick up here before we go on is that when you think of Houston, Texas, and I've been there before, when you think of Houston, Texas, and when you think of the sort of the land of that city and how many people live there, 5,000 cases in that one city. Over 3,000 cases here in South Carolina. Over 5,000 in Houston, Texas. That's a lot of cases. And that is bad. It is showing that this virus can spread exponentially. This virus is killing people at rapid rates. More people are dying. And how do you get the people who are not staying home to stay home? Should there be legal ramifications for those who are not staying home to stay home? Why do the people think that not staying home is the best way for you not to catch the virus? Or why do people think that you cannot catch the virus? I mean, the same people that are saying, I can't catch the virus, or if I get the virus, whatever, it's what? It doesn't matter. I mean, those are the same people that catch the virus, that feel bad, and they end up dying from this coronavirus. This is a serious time, this is a serious virus, and this is no time to play around. Actions to stay at home need to be put in place now. In other words, South Dakota, I've been following this story as well. South Dakota has not issued a stay-at-home order yet, when cases have been going up there exponentially as well. So what will we see in the coming days? South Carolina, on the other hand, has ordered a stay-at-home order. Over 3,000 cases now. We're only on stage 2. So buckle up, America, because it's going to be a very, very long ride.
Hey Google.
More than 100 billion words are translated every day.
Lift your hand.
Thank you very much for your help.
ご助力ありがとうございます。
Words about food. Words about friendship. About sport. About belief. About fear. words that can hurt and sometimes divide. But every day, the most translated words in the world are "How are you?" "Thank you." And "I love you."
All right, welcome back. Joining me now for the interview is Congressman Marvin Pendarvis, who has been doing some great work to combat the coronavirus. Congressman Pendarvis, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Hey, Jeremiah, how are you? It's a pleasure to be on the show. I'm not in Congress yet. I'm in the South Carolina House of Representatives, but it's a pleasure to be on your show, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. When you were a kid, did you ever dream about becoming a state legislator?
I can't say I dreamt about it, but I always had visions of me being in a position to impact people. So from the age of 5, I knew that I wanted to be an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I wanted to use those skills to advocate on behalf of the community that I grew up in. And I found out early on in my career, through high school, college, and even when I got to law school, that I was called to do more than just to be a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
That there was more that I had a responsibility. There was more of a responsibility that I felt like I shouldered to impact the community. And so I really started to think about public service and what I could do beyond just my professional calling.
Hmm. On March 19th, the Post and Courier posted an article about the Supreme Court's decision to halt all foreclosures. You were part of this effort, and you said, quote, "We can't penalize people for not having the income they expected," end quote. What made you join this effort?
Well, to be honest with you, I've always been an advocate for tenants' right.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt like we are continuously, by our policies and some of the things that we do, waging this war on the poor, the underserved, and the vulnerable. And I want to make sure that tenants are protected with the virus and the fact that many of us have lost jobs. Many of us are able to have the income that we typically would receive. That causes us to go into situations where, in some situations, they're unable to pay rent. Mm-hmm. They're unable to make mortgage. They can't pay basic utilities. Things that you need to survive day to day, a roof over your head and just basic functions of your house. Those are things that people were not having. Those are things that this virus put people in a position to where it was making it difficult for them to take care of those things. So I just wanted to be part of an effort to make sure that we said that can't happen. It would be immoral and unjust of us as a society to penalize those who have been unable to make rent and because of the virus due to no fault of their own. This virus has affected all of us in a variety of ways, and people who aren't able to make rent or mortgage are just a part of that. And we have to make sure that we're standing up for them and advocating on their behalf.
If you could go into context, what exactly did this order mean, and will it be extended rather than sticking with the initial May 1st date?
Yeah, so simply put, all the order said was that there can't be any evictions or foreclosures filed until May 1st. That doesn't mean that tenants' obligation to pay rent is waived or your obligation to pay mortgage is waived. It's just saying that if you don't or if you're unable to, that you can't be evicted until after May 1st. I think it's prudent for us to extend it temporarily. We learn more about this virus every day. And the reality is we're still not doing as much as we need to in order to flatten the curve, and as long as that's happening, I think we're going to see the effects of this well into the summer. And so it'd be prudent for us to have some extension well into June and July. But on top of that, we've got to make sure that what the order does is just ensures that those folks aren't able to are forced in a position where they have to choose between their health and livelihood versus being in their house. And that's a decision that we should not force people to make. And so I'm glad to be part of an effort to stop it. And hopefully down the road, we're able to get some rental assistance, because what's going to happen is once this is over, and once we slowly start to recover, you're going to have a number of people who are back on rent. They're back on mortgage. You know, they owe quite a bit, and they're going to be evictions that are filed at a rapid rate. And we don't want a situation where people are facing eviction in large chunks, especially in North Charleston, where the eviction rate is already number one in the country. So what I'm hoping is, in addition to an extension, a modest extension of the order, the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures, I'm hoping that we get some kind of rental assistance, mortgage, and working with the banks to make sure that many of these people who live in these homes, who are paying rent or have to pay mortgage, have some of the resources that are due to them in order to make sure they're able to come out on the other side of this good.
According to the state news, SC lawmakers could postpone work until the fall in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak. Is that information accurate? And if so, how will you continue to work on legislation?
That's pretty accurate. We met 2 weeks ago, or last week in Columbia. When we met, we pretty much took up a resolution that was going to extend the funding of state government. We more than likely will go back one more time before May to finish up some of the details of that continuing resolution, but we won't be taking up any of the legislation that we had previously been working on until September, more than likely. And after that, it'll be it. So the session, effectively, as we knew it, that had been taking place and wasn't supposed to end until May 14th, is effectively over. We'll be taking up legislation in September, but it won't be any new bills. It'll be things that have already been passed through both houses and both chambers of the General Assembly, and matters related to COVID-19 and the budget.
What legislation are you currently working on for the coronavirus?
Well, as you alluded to earlier, I'm all about trying to work on legislation that will give rental assistance for families that need it. I think housing is a right, and we have to ensure that we maintain the fundamentals of our society, which is ensuring people have a roof over their head. And so I'm hoping that we can keep people in their homes by providing some kind of rental assistance. I'm working with the South Carolina Housing Authority, several of our federally elected officials, in addition to some legislation that I presented that would allow the General Assembly to tap into some of the budget surplus that is available in order to fund rental assistance.
SCNow.com published an article about the coronavirus, and in that article you said, quote, "The virus is also unweaving the fabric of communities, particularly in poorer areas." End quote.
That's true.
Have you been speaking to your constituents about this issue?
Yes, I did a town hall a couple weeks ago that allowed constituents to take part, ask questions, and hear from me on what the virus is doing and some of the resources that are available to them as they look to recover as a community, as a family. And the biggest thing that I've learned is the virus is only exacerbated issues that already existed in our society. And most of those issues deal with the poor and underserved. You've got health care that's to the forefront. You've got housing that's to the forefront. You've got minimum wage and decent wages, and that's to the forefront. Unemployment, things that we have been talking about that we need to be addressing. We're finally having to come to grips with it and wrestle with how we handle it. So the virus has only forced us to deal with the issues that we've long neglected.
I want to go back to the eviction thing because it's very intriguing of how that's sort of handled. So if after the coronavirus is over, and let's say you have a single mother of like 5 children, will she be evicted, or will they give her time to pay?
It depends on the landlord. I mean, that's a great question. I think, in some places she will be evicted. I would not be surprised. In some places, she may be able to work with some nonprofit groups and different agencies that are providing some rental assistance, and that'll be able to help her. Hopefully, some of the things that I'm working on will be in action, so that we'll be able to provide her some kind of resource so that she's not evicted. But that's my fear, that when this is over, there will be a number of people like that single mother of four and so many others like her that will be facing eviction. And we can't allow that to happen.
Yeah. I want to discuss now some of the other things that you have done as a state legislator. For instance, when you wore a Kobe Bryant jersey on the House floor to honor him. What made you decide to do that?
Well, Kobe's my all-time favorite player. I remember that Sunday when I got news that he had died in the helicopter accident. I was in Atlanta with some friends, and we were out. It was surreal. The place we were at, you could hear pins drop.
Yeah.
And it moved me in a real way. And you would have thought that I had met him and known him personally, with just the impact that he had on the basketball world and just society in general. People grew up, especially those who play basketball, going to want to be like Kobe, want to model his game. And so it was a tribute to that. And also, this is my own personal way of honoring an icon, a legend, my favorite player. I remember that three-peat in 2000, 2001, and 2002 with him and Shaq, and the battles they had with the Celtics in 08, 09, and they were 8 and 10, and being able to finally get over the hump and win 5 championships, and what he was able to do for the Lakers organization was just really an ode to my favorite player and the legacy that he's left behind.
Has your re-election process been delayed recently?
It's not been delayed, but it certainly has changed the way we are doing it. I'm currently in a re-election. I've got a primary opponent, so we're raising money. We're actively campaigning as best as we can. Of course, everything has to be remote now. We're not going door to door. We're doing community events, but we're able to send mailers. We're doing things digitally using social media. So we just have to be creative in how we campaign, but we're still campaigning. To my understanding, the election is still going to be held on June the 9th, so we've got to march forward as if that is the case.
On June the 9th, will there be absentee ballot voting?
Well, there will there's always absentee ballot voting. The question is whether they'll expand the definitions by which you could be included as absentee.
Yeah.
That's something that we're looking to. Of course, there are some efforts that are pushing to do automatic absentee no matter what, so that we're able to just vote, because there's a real fear. We don't want to have what happened in Wisconsin, where people are, you got so many long lines, and the polling locations that that typically we have are closed, and we don't have enough workers because they're fearful, and many of them are older, so they're part of the vulnerable population. So there's a lot of things that are still being worked out, and there are active conversations that are taking place, and it's my understanding that we're still going forward with the election as planned on June the 9th, and of course, if anything changes, I'll let my folks know. We'll know shortly.
On April 8th, you tweeted about being called into session to vote on resolutions that ensures the government still operates. What was the atmosphere like in that room, and if you could, what resolutions were being voted on?
Well, it was really just the one that I mentioned earlier. It was a continuing resolution to ensure that funding is extended. Many people don't know, but if we don't have a budget that's passed by July 1, then, of course, we can't operate state government. So many agencies and many functions of government aren't able to function. But so in order to do that, and if we don't have a budget, we have to pass a continuing resolution, which means that the levels at which different agencies were funded last year, they will continue at those levels until we're able to pass a new budget. So it really is just a stopgap measure to ensure that there's continuity in government spending and government function until we're able to pass a budget.
Given the outbreak, will there be an amendment to allow remote congressional sessions?
I think that people may propose that. I don't think that will likely happen. That's just my suspicion.
Okay. South Carolina now has over 3,000 cases. What is your message to those who are intimidated by the virus or have been affected by it?
We will overcome this. We've been through many challenges as a country, as a nation. We've faced it, and we faced it head on. We've taken the information that's available to us. We've made sure that we take all precautions necessary, and on the other side of it, we've been able to bounce back. And so this will be the same. It's an invisible enemy, unlike any that we've seen in centuries, but it's one we'll overcome. We will overcome it with testing. We will overcome it with due diligence on each and every citizen's part by making sure that they adhere to social distancing measures and making sure that they're at home and using protective masks when they're out in public. But it'll be overcome because we'll band together. We'll ensure that whatever response is necessary from a government is put in place, and a community will rally behind it. It'll teach us a lot about who we are, and I think we'll be stronger because of it. And so my message to people is that this too shall pass. Pain may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. And so when we wake up in the morning, it'll be brighter, and we'll be smiling.
All right, once again, my guest is State Legislator Marvin Pendarvis. Thank you for coming on the show.
Ms. Patterson, it's a pleasure to be here, and if there's any time that you want me on, I'll be glad to be back. Keep doing what you're doing, young man.
Thank you. All right, we'll be right back.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, Liz and I are going to do some work around the house. Do you know any good contractors?
I might.
That's great. Can you check their qualifications? Make sure they have great reviews, and research the average price for the job. Oh, and book them on Wednesday. Actually, make it Friday.
When the water. You can't expect your neighbors to do everything Home Advisor can. So for a better way to get home projects done right, just ask Home Advisor.
Quote, having a vaccine to deal with the virus as it evolves is going to be important, but what we do, that's phase 5. But what we do, that's phase 5. Making preparation for the next pandemic a national security priority. Unfortunately, we've entered a period where emerging infectious diseases are increasing with alarming frequency. Go back to the first coronavirus. Recall the major problems with SARS in 2000 to 2003. That was supposed to be a wake-up call for the world to be ready for these things. Unfortunately, I don't think we've got the message. We got complacent afterwards, but then we had H5N1, avian influenza. We actually had a pandemic in 2009 with H1N1 influenza. We had Ebola from 2004 to 2016. We've had MERS, we've had Zika, we've had Ebola again in the Democratic Republic of Congo. COVID-19 became the nightmare scenario that many of us in the community have been afraid of. Now we know we have to go into phase 5, pandemic preparedness with renewed vigor. End quote. Once again, this is from the Houston article of a pandemic expert at Texas A&M University is talking about the coronavirus. He said the coronavirus will have 5 stages. We are only in stage 2. We will be getting to that 5th stage. It'll be a while, but we will get there. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the Jeremiah Patterson Show. I hope you enjoyed the interview with State Legislator Marvin Pendarvis. Thank you, everyone, once again for listening. Share this episode with a loved one or a friend. Have a great day. Stay healthy, stay hopeful, and stay home.